Working Cows Podcast, episode 258. This episode is brought to you by farmingtheweb.ca. Create your first listing today and receive a $15 Tim Hortons gift card.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
People get ready, then a change is coming your way. Be waking up early, then a dead man running late.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, powered by the Global Ag Network, and this episode is brought to you by farmingtheweb.ca. Are you looking to quickly and efficiently buy or sell agriculture products, or to get the word out about your ag event? Avoid the headaches of using non-ag marketplaces or classified sites, and check out farmingtheweb.ca, Canada's best free classified site designed by and for Canadian farmers. Create your first listing and receive a $15 Tim Hortons gift card. Buy, sell, get back to work. Get started today and visit farmingtheweb.ca. Very excited to be joined today by Will Harris of White Oak Pastures in Bluffton, Georgia, and we're going to talk to him about regenerating small towns. They've got quite a story there of the process they've been through at White Oak Pastures and the journey that they've been on in transitioning from commodity agriculture into a more regenerative system, and how that more regenerative system is not just regenerating the bottom line and the land, but also the social impacts of that regenerative system. And really appreciate Will and his willingness to join me today. So Will, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
I guess where I would like to start is kind of the history of Bluffton, Georgia, and related to this discussion of regenerating small towns in America. And I grew up in a small town in America. I grew up in a town that had, half a dozen, probably more businesses on its main street when I was a kid, and I slowly watched the Ace Hardware, the Sears, the J.C. Penney's, the Coast to Coast, and a few small locally owned clothing stores and sporting goods stores. I slowly watched all of that wither away and go away in my lifetime. I was born in 1984, so even as recently as 1990, I probably remember all of those stores on the main street of Belfouche, South Dakota. And now they've slowly withered away and gone away. And of course, 20 miles away, there's a Walmart Supercenter from where I grew up, so we see the growth of those things and the withering of the main streets in these towns. So I guess I would like to start with your understanding, or as far back as it's relevant to that discussion, of the history of Bluffton, Georgia.
So Bluffton has a very rich history. Bluffton, with only 103 or 4 citizens today, is the oldest town in the Creek Indian Treaty that's not on a navigable waterway. That means that when they took the indigenous people away from here, those Europeans chopped their way through the jungle to get to Bluffton and start this little town. And there's some reasons for it, some geological reasons. But from the economic perspective that you're referring to, Bluffton never had a railroad. Bluffton never had a factory or a mill. It's always been a purely agrarian economy. And as a result, it has suffered more decline than most. Bluffton was the trade center for about 15,000 people in the turn of the last century, about 1900. A lot of stores, a lot of commerce, a concrete swimming pool, a dance pavilion, a lot of stuff going on. Literally became a ghost town. And that occurred because centralized agriculture rendered rural America economically irrelevant. It just wasn't needed anymore. And it impoverished rural America. And the more agrarian your economy was, the more impoverished you became. So Bluffton took it on the chin harder than most. I'm very proud that today it's a nice little town. It's still tiny, but it's a little destination. It's gone from literally a ghost town where the only thing you could buy was a postage stamp. No other stores of any sort other than part-time post office. Yeah. And today we have a store, a restaurant, an RV park, an office building, a meeting center. It's a nice little town. It's a destination.
What role did rural America play prior to the centralization of agriculture?
Well, it was the economic driver in the town. Again, there's never been any industrial or manufacturing presence here. The whole economic driver was agriculture. And then when agriculture industrialized, centralized, commoditized, it just absolutely impoverished the town.
What was the town? The town was a place for those agricultural goods to be traded. Is that kind of how that worked? Is that what you're saying?
This is prior to internal combustion engines, right? By 1900, there were very few automobiles, so people had to be within a radius of their trade center. The radius being probably as far as you could walk. There was a little town about every 10 miles. So you can assume the trade center for that little town would have been about a 5-mile radius around the town. And when you do the math of that area, 40 acres and a mule, it's typically a farm and a farm family. In that area, had been probably multi-generational, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people subsisting on that 40 acres and a mule. And you just do the math, and you get about 15,000 people that would have bought what they bought here. They couldn't call Amazon, didn't bring it to them. They didn't go to the mall. Even today, where I'm sitting, I'm in the middle of Bluffton, Georgia. I'm 50 miles from a Walmart. And there aren't many places east of Mississippi that you can be 50 miles from a Walmart. And I'm very proud of that. Although they're building Dollar Generals and whatever else, those dollar stores are on every corner now.
Yeah. I heard somebody say one time, and I think it was Mike Calicrate said that the Walmart comes in, kills off all of the small mom and pop shops in the town, and then the Dollar General comes in behind like a vulture to pick the bones clean to finish them off and make sure that they're...
Mike's a friend of mine. I think he's exactly right. So often those kinds of stores are where people go to buy things they can't afford to put on the yard sale next summer.
Yeah. Or as Dave Ramsey says, we go there to buy things we can't afford to impress people we don't like with money we don't have.
Same deal. Better still.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I see it. I see the encroachment of the Dollar General, and in so many of these towns, 500-600 people, they've got a Dollar General and a Family Dollar. And I'm like, why do we need both? First of all, why do we need both? And then when I walk through the doors of those establishments, it's really depressing because there's nothing in there that isn't pre-cooked and pre-packaged. It's all highly processed foods, and I mean, it's basically jerky. It's been salted out the wazoo, so it will never go bad.
That's all bad. But what's really tragic to me is how that money is sucked out of the community.
Yeah.
The reason this community has advanced in the last decade and a half is when I changed my farm's practices. I went from about 3 or 4 minimum wage employees to 180 employees that make well above the county average. This farm is the largest private employer in the county, and we write checks for over 100 payroll checks for over $100,000 every Friday in that building right over there in this little town with 100-something people. And
Wow.
that makes it economically relevant again. And the
Yeah.
money stays here and turns and turns and turns, except for things like packaging and insurance and energy. Most of our money stays here in the community.
Is White Oak Pastures is that where that money is turning? Is it, or have there been new injections of economic places for people to go and spend their money since this transition?
Well, the number of them that we put in that I mentioned to you, but the money doesn't stay, and pretty much all there is in Bluffton is what White Oak Pastures has put in, admittedly. But the money doesn't stay right here in this town. There's a town 12 miles that way, and 14 miles that way, and 13 miles that way, and 14 miles that way. And a lot of my employees, we only have, again, 180 employees, 101 people in town. So most of my employees would love to live in Bluffton, and we bought a bunch of houses and accommodated as many as we can. But they commute from these other little towns around, and the businesses certainly do better there.
Why is your model of agriculture, or the model of agriculture that you've approached? I'm going to assume that many people have seen and heard you talk in different places about what you guys are doing there. But why is that model of agriculture facilitating that revival of the town, of the county?
It's because the payroll would be the biggest single factor. I guess the best way to say it is this. This is about a $25 million business. We sell about $25 million worth of product a year. And our net profitability is very close to break even. What that tells me is we write checks for $25 million a year as well. So, and that money, as I pointed out, except for a few big categories, packaging, insurance, energy, and another few things I can't think off the top of my head, it's all written locally. We don't send a lot of money to Wall Street or Silicon Valley and the other places. The agriculture here is so much less input. The agriculture here is primarily row crop, peanut, cotton, corn. And I don't know what it costs to put in an acre of any of those today. $1,000 an acre or so probably would be in the ballpark. And most of that $1,000 an acre that's spent goes to Bayer in Germany or whoever else that's around the world.
Yeah, the guys that are developing the seeds are the same guys that are developing the chemicals to keep the seeds producing, and they end up with all of it.
And the pharmaceuticals.
Yes. Yeah. And the pharmaceuticals to fix the issues that the food caused. But that's another discussion. You guys are bringing in all of these outside employees, or you brought in these outside employees. What would you say on the number of acres you're on? And we don't need to talk about numbers necessarily, but how many people would the county average farm have to farm that many acres?
Well, I don't want to talk about acres. The farm here is 3,200 acres, which is not really big in this part of the country. In addition to that, we've grazed another 1,200 or so solar arrays that we have a vegetation management contract with sheep and sometimes poultry on those. So if you add all that together, it'd be close to 5,000 acres. And I would say it wouldn't be unusual for a farmer to farm 5,000 acres of peanut, cotton, corn, monoculture in rotation with 4 or 5 people. That 6 or 3 on the high side, probably.
Yeah. So you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 times the number of people on the same number of acres. What does it take to make that work? I mean, what kind of shift do you have to make from 3 or 4 crops in rotation to what you are to make that work?
So that's a good question. And I tell people it's like three legs on a stool. There's what we all think about immediately when we start thinking about regenerative agriculture is what we do in the pasture. The people and animals rotating them, the feeding poultry, feeding pigs, moving sheep, goats, cattle around, those kind of things. And that is very important. But it's kind of the easy part. The second leg of the stool is processing. Consumers don't buy cows and hogs and sheep; they buy beef and pork and lamb. So you got to make that conversion. In our case, we built USDA inspected red meat slaughter plant on the farm, and then later a USDA inspected poultry plant on the farm. Hopefully individual farmers won't have to do that. There are cooperative ways of doing it. It wasn't possible for me 25 years ago when I was getting started. And then the last leg that is equally important is the monetization, is the selling the product. You produce it on the pasture, you add value to it in the processing, then you've got to monetize it. And that's harder than it sounds because the zip codes where we produce in Georgia and Alabama and Missouri and Arkansas are not necessarily the zip codes where they consume this kind of food. That would be the high disposable income zip codes on the coast and bigger cities. So market access is very hard. But the good news for the small town is it takes people to produce in the pasture the way we do it. It takes people to add value in the processing. It takes people to monetize it, package it, ship it. So that's where the economic boost comes from.
And that there has to be more dollars returned per acre in this model as well, over what the the county average would be to continue that. And it's about, I've heard you talk earlier or before on other podcasts about the difference between efficiency, which is what the commodity agriculture row crop model produces, is highly efficient systems, and managing complexity. And so I guess talk a little bit about that, about how the difference between what you can get paid for being highly efficient and what you can get paid for managing a complex system.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I bristle when I hear people say, well, it should be cheaper if it's produced in a regenerative management situation because you're not buying all those inputs. And that is so short-sighted. We reductionist science didn't give us all those tools that take cost out of production. And when we give them up, we add cost back to production. That's the way that works. Now, to take that a little further down that rabbit hole, I think USDA, the most recent number I saw was that the farmer gets like 14.3 or 7 cents of every consumer dollar spent for food. It's in that range. And that means, and of course, in our scenario, our situation, we get just about 100 cents of every dollar. And that sounds like that's just great news. I mean, we can make a lot of money with that. But what we've got to remember is that in our system, we have re-internalized the cost that is externalized in the industrial model. If you're a farmer anywhere in the 48 states, I mean, I don't care what kind of farmer you are, and you raise a 48,000 pound load of your product, I don't care if it's hogs or soybeans or tomatoes or oranges or cattle, you can pick up the phone and call Big Ag, and they'll come and get it. That's all you got to do. And an EFT, electronic funds transfer, or a check will show up paying you something for it. It's not much, but it's something. Here, we re-internalize all those costs. We don't just raise that 48,000 pound load of whatever it is. We got to process it. We got to get it marketed. So we do these things, and it adds the value to us, what we get out of it. So that's the economics of how that works. And that's back on that money staying here in the community.
What
I guess
yeah. What is the value that you get? I mean, aside from money, you've said it's marginally profitable enterprise. What is the value that you get? I mean, and I mean, you recently had a post that went viral with your response to Bill Gates and his controlling of land and continuing to amass more land. But what's the value that you get here and now out of this model?
I'll answer that question. Thank you for bringing up that. So I'll tell you what, I want to acknowledge that Stuart Barney of Fox News kicked my butt. I want to go ahead and acknowledge that up front. He did. So good for you, Mr. Barney. Yeah. The value to me here is great. When I talk to my friends that are CPAs and MBAs and CEOs, and we have honest conversations about the financials of our business. They think it's ludicrous that we would have 20-something million, maybe $30 million tied up in this operation, and 9 out of it is debt, the rest of it's equity owned by me that gets almost no return. I mean, that's just ludicrous to a person who is embedded in modern financials. And I get it. I mean, I understand enough about that to understand where they're coming from with that. And I'm not comfortable with it, but it's the way it is. I have put myself in that position and will continue to put myself in that position because it has great benefits to me and my family. First of all, we don't rely on a quarterly financial report or an annual financial report to tell us how well we're doing or how poorly we're doing. I think that quarterly and annual financial reports are not good benchmarks to measure your accomplishment on. We think of things very generationally. I'm the 4th generation to own and manage this farm of my family. I have 2 daughters and their spouses who are the 5th. Between them, they're having babies like this, the 6th. And the things that we do, the way we manage this farm, does not maximize the return, short-term return on our investment. It doesn't, not at all. But in the long run, in the generational perspective, which is what is important to us, I think what I'm doing is the greatest wealth building exercise or utilization of my assets that I can find. In the last 20 years, my land has gone from less than 1% organic matter to over 5% organic matter. And we're not going to have a biology lesson today on how much that adds to the value of this farm, but it's a lot. We have created a business that not only creates jobs for 180 people, but it's employed everybody in my family that wants to be here. Some of them didn't want to be here, and that's fine. But the ones who chose to be here found gainful employment. And those who are here can eat 21 meals a week together in our little restaurant up here. I'll be there 21 times a week, and they come and go as they see fit. But I get to see my family on a very regular basis. You touched a little bit on efficiency versus resilience. And I think that while what we do here on White Oak Pastures is certainly not the most profitable model that I could choose, I think it's a very resilient model. We're not bulletproof here, but we're bullet resistant. And if there's adverse weather conditions, we can't take a hit from a Cat 5 hurricane. No, we cannot, and be unimpeded. We can stand a lot more with adversity than a lot of businesses or a lot of farmers can. We wouldn't know that we had been a pandemic if we hadn't heard it on the radio. Most of us caught it and came back to work, and we never missed a day feeding animals and slaughtering animals. We didn't euthanize any animals because it's a very resilient. And I can go on and on. I don't want to bore you with it, but there's so many ways in which a cyber attack that cripple the world would stagger us a little bit, but we'd still feed the cows and slaughter them when they were ready. And I think it offers resilience is the ability of a being or a vessel or a business to withstand a hard shock, and then go back to operating relatively normally. And I think we've built incredible resilience into this business, and we're very proud of it.
Yeah. I've heard you say other places that you ship meat or ship product to 48 states, but you would rather not. What would be the ideal for you? What would you like to be doing?
As small a territory as I can. You're exactly right. We do ship product to 48 states online, and I really don't want to do that. And by the way, I need to do it. The way our business is set up, our debt structure, it takes $25 million worth of product sales a year to pay our bills and operate this pretty good sized business at break even. I don't want to send my $25 million worth of stuff to the four corners of this nation. And I want it to be as small an area as can. In my perfect world, there would be a White Oak Pastures in privately owned White Oak Pastures in every agricultural county in the nation, or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever the market would bear. And we would all feed our proximity. And I don't know if that's, in our case, it's probably not a 30-mile radius, because this is such an impoverished, low population. Actually, Forbes magazine said that Clay County, Georgia, I'm sitting in Clay County, Georgia right now, was the poorest county in the United States of America in 2020, I think it was, based on household income. So I can't sell $25 million worth of stuff in my county. Can't do it. But, and we help people. There's a number of other farms that I believe in. I hadn't visited hundreds of farms, but I visited some. And I'm happy to say, you got a really good grass-fed beef producer there in your state. And, we're going to take care of ourselves first. We got to sell $25 million worth of product to keep the wind under our wings. But much rather sell it. I'm 3 hours, a little over 3 hours from Atlanta, and probably 4 hours from that Central Florida. So I shouldn't be sending stuff to Maine and Washington and New Mexico. There's plenty of stuff right here. I don't need that many customers.
Is that an issue of people that are doing that work in those local areas getting their name out there, or what would you say is how do we tip that back in the right direction?
So I think first of all, there's just not enough of us doing it. That's the first problem. And the reason for that is it's hard. It's a very high capital outlay to be in this business, a low return on it. So it's just economically difficult. So first place is just not enough volume. Second place is that market access is hard. I sell a lot of stuff to grocery stores, Whole Foods Market, Publix, and Kroger. But if I were starting today, I would not be able to do that. I'm able to sell to them because I started 20 years ago, more than that, when I was the only girl at the party that had grass-fed beef. And it's independent small farmers like us don't fit well in the big grocery model. And it's not that these are evil people that don't want us. I hear farmers say they just don't want us in there. Well, that's not what's happening. What's happening is those huge grocery chains or food service chains are staffed by managers and executives that have a way of doing business, and they need to be able to pick up the phone and say, I need 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets delivered to the following 4 warehouses. And people like me, who are a little bigger than most, I'll never see 48,000 pounds of 6-ounce ribeyes ever in one place, not from my farm. So market access is just very difficult. It's hard for consumers to do business with us. They got to want to do business with us because it just takes bandwidth for them to do it.
You talk about this being a generational venture that you're on. Is there a day coming in the future when it doesn't take $25 million worth of sales to keep the wind under your wings? Are you moving towards that in maybe even in a generation or two, or is it going to necessitate continued expansion to keep that going?
No, I don't foresee anticipated expansion here at all. We're bigger than we ever intended to be. When I said that we were early in the game, and that was an advantage for us in that we were able to get in some stores we wouldn't have gotten in otherwise. It was also a disadvantage because we went in when there was nobody to process for me. I started with a local processor, very local, and they could not do enough business for me to be profitable. I started then with a processor that was 100 miles away, and all these wonderful people. The local guy and the guy 100 miles away, wonderful folks. But he reached the point that too much of his business was in White Oak Pastures and chose to not do any more for us, which is perfectly understandable. I don't blame him a bit. So I was forced to eat, and that was the only 2 options I had. It was within any kind of reasonable distance. So I was stuck at that point with either having to build a plant myself, which I did, or not be in that business anymore. And I chose to build a plant myself. But hopefully, while it's harder for somebody starting today to get in a grocery store, it's easier for me. It'll be easier for them to find processing because while there's still not much, there's a lot compared to what it was 20 plus years ago, 25 years ago. And there's more and more going in. All this money that's been put into small and medium poultry and red meat plants, they're probably not completed yet, but I know there's a bunch of them being built. So if the $25 million that I have got to do comes from the $7.2 million of investment in processing facilities that I've got. And I built them. I mean, I can't pull my money back out of it. So,
yep. So one of the, I said it the other day that was a red pill moment for me. Somebody said something to me that changed the way I looked at the world. And it was Steve Strassheim who told me that if you're going to be in this direct to consumer agricultural space, you need to love the selling more than you love the farming, or it's going to be difficult. And I think he's talking about kind of a more shake the hand that feeds you, small scale kind of a thing there. But would you say that there's still a place for somebody who says, I don't want to deal with this many people. I just want to raise these cattle. I want to raise these sheep, these pigs, these chickens, and then I want to pass it off to somebody who can process it and still help me extract more value out of it than I would get in a commodity game. Is there still room in this business for that kind of a player?
I think so, absolutely. I don't know. I think there's all different kinds of models that are being practiced and will be practiced. In the case of you got to love the selling more than you do the production. Or I would amend that and say you got to have a daughter that enjoys the selling more than the production. If you told me I had to post something on Instagram or die, I just have to die. I've been able to go back to the pasture myself because I've got people who are specialists, some family members, some not. The two most highly paid employees at White Oak Pastures, and I'm including myself and my daughters in this, the two highest paid people are not family members. They're people that came here a decade or so ago. They were specialists that had skill sets that we do not have, and they make a contribution that we cannot do without. And what we pay them is not above the market. It's what their skill set is bringing. So, that's the model. Being so early into this deal shaped how we do it. We kind of had to do everything for ourselves because it wasn't being done much of anywhere. Today, as hard as the market access is, and it's hard, a lot of these things have been figured out and don't have to be refigured out.
Right. Yep. What would you say to somebody who's looking at the current landscape and they're looking to get started? What advice would you give them? What pointers would you give them?
Well, it would be impossible for me to address that on a podcast. But we a very good question. But I just
yeah.
That's where Stuart Varney ate my butt up. But I can't say it that fast. But we formed last year. White Oak Pastures founded a nonprofit called CFAR, Center for Agricultural Resilience. And we literally have 3-day sessions. That it's not how to farm sessions. It's how to think about the approach to the market and how tailored it's got to be. Every ecosystem is different. Well, where are you right now?
Western South Dakota. Western South Dakota. Yep.
In South Dakota.
Yes,
I'm in the coastal plains of Georgia.
Right.
Jay Brown, one of the best friends I got in the world up there in Bismarck, North Dakota. He spent a lot of time here, and I'm up there. The difference in those ecosystems is incredible. And then the economies are different. To pick Gabe again, Gabe lives in one of the most sparsely populated states in the country, but he can see Bismarck from his front porch. I too am in an economically impoverished area, but it's 50 miles to a mall.
Yep.
Here. So every ecosystem and every economy and every ecosystem is different, and those shape your operation more than what you think you want to do.
Right. How is it that if you can talk to this a little bit in the just a couple minutes that we've got left, how is it that Clay County, Georgia, was ranked as the most impoverished? Is it mostly agricultural? Is it mostly an agricultural county, or what kind of economy is there?
It's because for a number of reasons, some of which are good reasons, we have clung to the agrarian economy. And the agrarian economy generates an incredible amount of money, but very little of it sticks where the production is done. We can go on and on about that. The centralization.
Yep.
So we talk about the industrialization of agriculture. We talk about it all day, but it's what really impacted the land and the water and the climate. Industrialization, starting to treat a complex farm like a complicated factory.
Mm-hmm.
Commoditization is number two, and it affected the food. No longer did farmers, were they rewarded by the market by making their product the best it could be. The name of the game is a race to the bottom to meet the minimum standard. Minimum commodity standard.
Doesn't matter if it acts like a tomato; it just has to look like a tomato.
That's it. And then the third one that we're talking about mostly here is that centralization. And in the centralization, the raw material, raw product commodity was produced out here in these impoverished rural areas. And then we moved at that breakneck speed to somewhere else that was centralized to add the value to it. And the ownership was also not, it was central, it was no longer locally owned entities. We've all seen the models on the internet about food and who owns what.
Right.
And, and being from all my first 20 years of my profession post-college, I was part of that food chain, that big industrial commodity food chain. And we stepped out and became our own tiny, tiny, tiny little food chain. And that's where that is.
Yeah, very good. I can't think of a better transition to some bonus content that I'd like to capture with you on just the simple statement. I'd like to capture your thoughts on the simple statement, food is medicine. And so to free up some time for that conversation, I'm going to wrap this up and we'll transition to that if you got some more time to share with me, and then we'll capture that. But do you have anything else, any other major nuggets that you wanted to share or things you wanted to promote? We'll put in the show notes page for today a link to the CFAR that you talked about. We'll talk about that. I'll put a link there. People can go there and find out more about that. But anything else that you wanted to share or promote?
I don't think so. It takes effort on consumers. Consumers will decide how big this regenerative land management food production system will be. Farmers don't get to decide that. Consumers decide that. And I worry about it because it is more expensive and more time consuming and more difficult for consumers. And there's so much greenwashing going out there causing it to be even more confusing. And I really worry about there being enough concerned consumers to allow more and more people to be in it. We're okay. We got in, we got a customer base, we're all right. But so many people that would like to are being held out by greenwashing.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are you looking to quickly and efficiently buy or sell agriculture products or to get the word out about your ag event? Avoid the headaches of using non-ag marketplaces or classified sites and check out farmingtheweb.ca, Canada's best free classified site designed by and for Canadian farmers. Create your first listing and receive a $15 Tim Hortons gift card. Buy, sell, get back to work. Get started today and visit farmingtheweb.ca. Very good stuff there. Will, of course, is a great guy to talk to, and this over the next few episodes, I think my bonus content that I've been capturing is going to be focusing on that food is medicine statement. So if you want to check that out, head over to patreon.com/workingcows and grab that and enjoy that bonus content as well. Been doing pretty good about capturing content every week, so head over there and check that out. Coming up next week on the Working Cows podcast, really looking forward to sharing my conversation with Will Winter. Had him on a few months back to talk about all natural approaches to herd health and livestock health, and he mentioned that part of their process there is measuring regenerativity. And so we're going to talk to him about what are the measures they use for regenerativity. How do they decide how regenerative a farm is? And they've got a plus or minus 10 scale in 14 different areas, and they 140 would be perfect, and negative 140 would be the worst. And we're going to talk about how they manage those things. And so, been really enjoying this opportunity, and just thanks so much for all the support and for listening in, and would encourage you to share the show with one person who you think would enjoy it as well. So we will see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.